Mr. Carmichael. I didn't expect you to come so quickly.
Charles Carmichael always comes quickly.
The following is an in-depth story analysis. If you haven't seen Chuck, you may want to before watching this video. Nowadays, the concept of time slots, prime time, the Friday night death slot, it's a fugazi, it's a fugazi, it's a wazi, it's a woozy. But back in the days before streaming services, stacking your deck with shows so anything would be on when people tuned in was just as crucial as generating buzz to any network. In my retrospectives, I approach television from a creative perspective. I like or disliked this show's length, and would it have benefited from more episodes or less episodes?
Fewer.
Oh, sorry, Stannis. But the truth is, that's not always a creative decision. More often, you hand the network suits a premise, and the command comes down the chain, condense your show down to this many episodes because that's the amount of time slots we need to fill, or extend your show this many episodes because you're popular and we have an excess of time slots on our hands. Think Buzz Lightyear of Star Command, which ran away with a 62-episode order immediately after the pilot so they could meet Disney syndication requirements. But I still attest the series most buffeted by the winds of network time slot chicanery was Chuck, with Season 1 cut short by the 2007 Writers Guild of America strike, Season 2 serving as a makeup class of sorts, Season 3 intended as a definitive series wrap-up, only to be extended 6 episodes at the last minute, and Season 4 serving as basically one big time slot filler with a similar fate. No show was ever more of a network plaything, though much like Community, fortunately, this NBC cult classic had the ever-reliable Subway in their corner. Don't freak out, this is Chuck. Chuck follows the adventures of Charles Bartowski, a once promising Stanford computer science student who was framed for academic dishonesty by his hotshot dorm mate Bryce Larkin. Not satisfied to just get him kicked out of Stanford, Bryce also stole Chuck's girl Jill. 5 years later, Chuck now works retail at the Buy More, and though sister Ellie and best friend Morgan do their best to remind him he's a winner at heart, Chuck is haunted by the what-if, white-collar dreams Mr. White Collar stole from him back in college. About to shake up Chuck's life for a second time, it turns out Bryce Larkin grew up to become a CIA spy. Going rogue, Bryce destroys a government supercomputer known as the Intersect, a repository of all the combined knowledge of every US intelligence agency that's also capable of using artificial intelligence to extrapolate on the information and predict future crimes. After obliterating the Intersect, Bryce is gunned down, but not before emailing Chuck a video file with encrypted images that downloads the Intersect into his brain.
You're telling me all of our secrets are in his head?
Chuck is the computer.
What did you say?
Oh, hold on a second. Just got an email. Looks like it's some sort of video file from my old college buddy. Let's open it up. Ah, damn it. Now I know a bunch of government secrets that I shouldn't. I'm gonna have to go on all sorts of adventures and get strung along by my bombshell CIA handler. Oh, this really takes the biscuit. If only I'd kept my online identity safe with this video's sponsor, Surfshark VPN. Surfshark is a powerful tool to secure your online data. Their clean web feature blocks ads, trackers, malware, and phishing attempts, allowing you to surf the web safely. Not only that, but a VPN also encrypts your online data and helps secure your personal information when you use public Wi-Fi. That way, you won't have to worry about prying eyes like those of John Casey or various search engines tracing your searches when you're just trying to have a little private time with Miss Irene Demova. Surfshark VPN also allows you to swap your real location for a virtual one on your device. With over 3,200 servers in over 100 countries around the globe, you can unblock streaming content only available in other countries. I may not be able to endlessly rewatch my beloved final season of Better Call Saul on American Netflix yet, but by masking my IP and appearing as though I'm streaming from the UK, where it's already available, I can watch Better Call Saul Season 6, along with a whole host of other shows I couldn't otherwise. And now you can too, with Surfshark VPN. Use code SLIPMAKER to get 83% off your purchase, plus 3 whole months free. 3! All that with a 30-day money-back guarantee, so there's no risk to try it out. Be sure to check the video description for the link. With Chuck now effectively becoming the walking, talking, one and only intersect, CIA agent Sarah Walker and NSA agent John Casey are assigned as his caretakers. When the supercomputer in Chuck's mind flashes on some seemingly innocuous person or object on the mean streets of Burbank or greater Los Angeles, the triple threat springs into action to thwart whatever terrorist scheme is about to unfold. The core premise of Chuck is uniquely both exciting schlock and relatable my life is shit workplace comedy. He's plucked out of his dreary, undesirable day job, which gives his life purpose, glamour, and excitement, even if it's at the cost of frequently facing life or death scenarios. On the other side of the coin, his life hasn't truly gotten any better. He isn't really a spy, the Bymore isn't really a cover job. When all is said and done, if they can get the intersect out of his head, he'll wind up right back where they found him, with only a head full of exciting memories and nothing to show for it, just like his ill-fated education at Stanford all over again. And of course, the most tortuous element of this double life is his cover story with Sarah. While John Casey poses as a mere co-worker, Sarah is posing as his new girlfriend, to explain why he's running around LA going to art auctions and defusing bombs with her every night. And since Sarah looks like this, I can only imagine the guy's cold shower temperatures are approaching absolute zero. Keep the blue balls at bay while Sarah very brazenly strings him along in order to keep his head in the game. The two begin to develop real feelings for one another, but the feelings are complicated by Sarah serving as a former partner to Bryce before his demise. Partner in more ways than one. Maybe the United States intelligence community should have had Sarah work at the Bymore and made Casey Chuck's boyfriend. Sure, the PDA might be harder to sell since they'll have zero mutual attraction, but imagine all the conflicts of interest you'd avoid.
Yeah, I catch you when you fall. It's touching, really.
No, I love you!
Keep it in your pants, Bartowski. Now get downstairs.
The turmoil of Chuck's lusting after Sarah is one of the show's core emotional through lines, but it isn't the only one. Between his juvenile friendship with childhood friend Morgan, dead-end despair with the Bymore, contrast to his up-and-coming overachieving sister, and unresolved yearning for the glory days of a life that was back at Stanford, Chuck the series thrives on the emotional ups and downs of its cast. On an episode-to-episode front, the strength of the show comes from the character dynamics that each caper hones in on. There's generally a very affecting through line that ties each week together. Morgan and Chuck hashing out their growing distance now that Chuck has supposedly landed himself a lady, leaving the bearded buffoon behind in single life. Team Chuck recognizing both their growing trust and the harsh reality of their relationships when all three fall under the influence of a truth serum. Chuck's inability to cope with the cock tease that is his fake relationship with Sarah, instead offering to pose as friends, only for later episodes to cock up his real relationships with further spy shenanigans. And of course, the most hard-hitting is his return to Stanford, a twist Chuck's arm sort of situation where he eventually learns Bryce only forced him to drop out to prevent him from becoming an intersect lab rat for the CIA. A wish fulfillment redemption after a road trip returning to the alma mater where you used to have so much fun before everything went wrong. Chuck's well-deserved reward for confronting the past. Kudos to your courage there, Chuck. Every time I see my alma mater, I die inside and immediately rush for a drink. And I drive past it every day, so as you can imagine, things are going great.
He's had 4 years to call and set the record straight. Now that he's gone... You know what, forget it. Bryce has betrayed a lot of people, hasn't he?
As far as the actual spy capers themselves, that's where Season 1 of Chuck struggles. Or more appropriately, that's where Season 1 of Chuck doesn't seem to try. The second episode is a creative concept, making hay while the sun is shining before all the characters are established, with a whodunit thriller where Casey and Sarah are the two primary suspects, with both mistrusting the other. Despite knowing Adam Baldwin and Yvonne Strahovski are series regulars, it was still entirely possible one of them would be a regular as a villain. And that's the kind of fake-out the writers can only pull early in the series run.
What do you really know about Sarah, Chuck? Huh? Think. She's CIA. She worked with Bryce. He was rogue. Maybe she is too. She found you in LA, but she couldn't grab you because I was around.
Unfortunately, after that, you have the rest of Season 1. The character dynamics never let you down, but the spy plot lines of the week almost always do. Considering the wacky goldmine that spy thriller films and novels are, you'd expect the weekly adventures to feel like more than the placeholders they are in year 1. So while Chuck is thrust into an ostensibly dangerous, unpredictable new routine, the routine is all too predictable to an observant audience. Chuck will flash on some terrorist stopping by LA, the team will go on a mission to intercept whatever MacGuffin is key to their plan in Act 2, and then they'll have a partial victory, typically in the form of securing the MacGuffin but letting the villain get away. Act 3 then sees the villain return, where Chuck and co must navigate a hostage situation, usually, but not always, with the unexpected aid of whatever the Buy More's B story of the week was. The first season has a bad habit of introducing intriguing concepts and then retrofitting them to fit the more bland house style. Like when Chuck meets a deranged rogue Axby of James Blonde's Q. We gonna have some fun with the Q concept? No. We're gonna do the Chuck shuffle beat for beat. Chuck vs. the Marlin, the season finale, shines simply because it defies the rigid house style. Chuck walks into the Buy More to find it robbed clean. Learning staff, evil spies, and the CIA all robbed the shop simultaneously the same night, and with both a recording betraying his identity and his sister's engagement ring lost in the pilfering, Chuck's entire world implodes into chaos as he races to recover both crucial items.
Can I get my sister's ring back? You guys are pretty damn thorough.
You should be more concerned about not making it to her wedding.
Can I talk to you for a second? Hold on.
It's not just exciting because it's a finale. They could have dropped this episode in as episode, 5, and it would still be the standout of season 1. It's a standout because of the way it shakes up the show's structure, enabling plot twists, unexpected spy and Buy More crossovers, and some genuine tension that would never be achievable with the by-the-number scripting of what came before. Fortunately, season 2 is quick to right the ship, with more creative and less predictable case-of-the-week episode structures, along with a stronger roster of villain guest stars, including Jordana Brewster, Andy Richter, Jenny McCarthy, Michael Rooker, Chevy Chase, and the late Michael Clark Duncan.
I'm stretching, getting limber,
Why are you doing that?
so I won't pull a muscle when I break your neck. Maybe you should get limber too.
Looping back on those unexpected spy and Buy More crossovers, let's talk about the Buy More. Much like the earlier seasons of The Office, the Buy More supporting cast is the kind of group I imagine a lot of viewers can relate to if they've ever worked a dead-end job. The show wasn't concerned with fleshing out Chuck's coworkers Lester, Jeff, and Anna, his de facto work rival Harry Tang, or his boss Big Mike, as down-on-their-luck losers with hearts of gold. Chuck is the down-on-his-luck loser with a heart of gold, and the show smartly recognized that we don't need a whole ensemble of the same archetype. Instead, amplifying the indignity of Chuck's dead-end job by forcing him to fraternize with a gaggle of sleazy, socially inept pervs. A wise decision. It shows us just how badly Chuck has been slumming it if this is the social fishbowl he's been trapped in for half a decade. And the wanton scumbaggery of the Buy More staff that's unconcerned with building audience sympathy for the characters at the same time lets the writers and actors cut loose and just make the nerd herd as depraved and funny as possible.
I shudder to think how people like you would respond to an actual catastrophe. A fire, an earthquake.
An all-out race war?
This even extends to Chuck's best friend Morgan, who avoids the common pitfalls of the bumbling, schlubby friend archetype. For now, the writers steer clear of just having him cause endless amounts of trouble for Chuck, which always makes audiences wonder, why does the main character still put up with this guy? But he's not exactly an articulate fountain of emotional support either. In fact, his reverence for his BFF Chuck has the same double-edged sword dynamic as Chuck's spy life. While it's inspiring to have someone ride or die like Morgan who so consistently looks up to him, it's also a tough pill for Chuck to swallow that the only person who isn't initially suspicious of his relationship with Sarah, and who actually believes Chuck is cool enough to get that girl, is a burnout man-child with zero self-awareness who's lusted after your sister since childhood.
You're kind of like a sister to me. Sister want to have sex with the so bad.
Oh, God, Morgan.
Each episode has a good habit of integrating the A spy stories and the B Buy More stories. Not only do the spy antics cause turmoil to Chuck's day job, threatening to leave Chuck worse off than he started if the intersect ever is purged from his noggin, but there's usually some sort of setup in the Buy More plot that will crop up at the climax and allow Chuck to defeat the villains in unexpected and often humorously low-rent ways. The Black Friday sale bug-out code Pineapple that allows Chuck to evacuate the building when it's flooded with undercover enemies is probably the most famous, but I'm also partial to the broken latch on the storage cage that winds up as a bait and switch, where the Buy More staff actually had the good sense to fix it off-screen, nearly dooming Chuck.
Who
Ooh, you got a big old guy thing. That was so broken this morning.
Consider these elements I'm praising exclusively a hallmark of Season 1, however. The later seasons will see the buy more elements of the series going further and further astray, but we'll get to that later. The original plan for the big reveal near the tail end of the season was going to be that Ellie's boyfriend Devon, nicknamed Captain Awesome thanks to his awesome lifestyle and frequent use of the word awesome, is actually an evil secret agent. However, the character became a fan favorite early on in the show's run, and the plan was dropped. In the long run, the series was better off for the decision. Since Captain Awesome plays a major part in a climactic status quo shift in the following season, that's a Chuck series highlight. And since the show would do the every love interest is secretly a spy thing to death in later seasons. So, even if Devon's secret sinister motives would have been novel at the time, they'd eventually seem like some sort of series original sin with the benefit of hindsight. Still, it was fun on a rewatch to pick up on the subtle hints the show intended to take the character in that radically different direction. A handful of scenes have Devon making some excuse to leave right before bad guys show up, and of course he's a graduate of UCLA, the rival school to USC, which is the alma mater of the series creators Chris Fedak and Josh Schwartz. Instead, the big reveal near the tail end of the season is that Bryce Larkin is still alive. Tricked into aiding a terrorist organization known as Fulcrum, he wised up to their plot to steal the Intersect, destroyed it, and shipped it off to Chuck. This puts a further damper on both Chuck's Thanksgiving dinner and Chuck's life of lies with Sarah, as he picks up hints that she may want to rekindle her former romance with her miraculously resurrected partner.
We're all supposed to say what we're thankful for.
I'm thankful that Bryce Larkin is dead and is not currently in my bedroom making out with my new girlfriend.
Wow, buddy, that was, really dark. And specific.
Talk about a gut punch. And adding to the gut punch is the pretty exceptional soundtrack Chuck's music supervisor threw together to punctuate these moments. Since the show played a big part in forming some of my musical tastes growing up, I would be remiss in my duties if I didn't give the playlist a shout out. Chuck utilizes nerd-adjacent 80s standards like Rush, Bon Jovi, and Huey Lewis, and the News. For the heart-to-heart emotional moments, the series is stacked with noughties-era indie rock and indie folk, and as a consequence, a handful of pivotal scenes from the show won't have clips featured in this retrospective, since I don't want all the ad revenue to get claimed by Bon Iver. And last but not least, we have the final showdown with a master poisoner set to Britney Spears' Toxic, which is so unbelievably on the nose that I can't help but love it. Ultimately, Sarah decides to stay on Team Chuck rather than join back up with Team Bryce, though Team Chuck won't even be Team Chuck for much longer. Kicking off Season 2, the rebuilt Intersect is about to be completed, now that Sarah's professionalism isn't preventing her from exploring, or let's face it, sometimes callously not even displaying, her genuine growing feelings for Chuck. The two can finally go on a real date. No spy stuff, no fakery, just the two finally allowing themselves to be together for one night and see how far it goes. Though I do mean literally one night. Sarah's due to be reassigned, so it's a real before sunrise situation. Oh, and did I forget to mention, also literally one night, because Chuck is about to die. You see, Casey has a secret secondary purpose on Team Chuck. When the new Intersect is up and running, kill the old one.
You understand the situation. We can't have another Intersect wandering around Los Angeles getting into trouble. Tomorrow night, eliminate Chuck Bartowski.
Fortunately for Casey, who was coming to respect Chuck's determination, despite their radically clashing methods and personalities, and fortunately for Chuck, who presumably doesn't want to die, the new Intersect is sabotaged by Fulcrum and explodes. It means Casey's off the hook, but also means Chuck is stuck working as the one and only Intersect. So he and Sarah have to go back to no romance in the workplace professionalism. Lucky for Chuck, life is about to get even more wish fulfillment-y for him. Unwittingly becoming a secret agent is one thing, but reuniting with your ex-girlfriend, finding out she never actually cheated on you, revealing to her you're not working minimum wage, and are in fact a super spy, and she falls in love with you again, is on a whole other level. It's the best of both Betty and Veronica worlds, as Chuck maintains his cover story relationship with Sarah in public, while secretly sneaking around in private to have a real relationship with Jill. Though of course, this being the Chuck universe, it's only a matter of time before the other shoe drops, and Jill is revealed as an agent of Fulcrum, albeit more of a coerced analyst type than a ruthless assassin type. This was was the first jaw-dropping enemy spy revelation the show ever pulled, so even if the constant reveals would wind up cheapened as the series went along, first time's the charm, and the twist is still impactful, even on a rewatch.
I'm sorry, General, but who in my life isn't a spy? My sister, my best friend? Should I just start asking people that when I first meet them? Hi, I'd like the extra value meal, and while we're on the topic, do you covertly work for a government espionage faction?
On the less impactful front, once Jill is out of the picture, we're back to the same old Sarah and Chuck will they won't they song and dance. Chuck and Sarah's romantic tension worked in season 1 because Sarah was a deliberately mysterious figure who played her cards close to the vest. Is Chuck deluding himself into thinking this relationship could ever become real just because he desperately wants to see it? Or is he second-guessing obvious signs of genuine attraction from her and incorrectly assuming he must be misreading their relationship? On top of that, it was easy to understand why Sarah would be reluctant to strike up a romance with Chuck, even if she was crazy about the guy, given for most of season 1, she believed her previous partner and lover died a traitor. But in the second season premiere, Sarah and Chuck's mutual attraction is plainly on the table, and while both of their exes passing through town at the start of the season was a decent enough way to briefly delay the inevitable humping like rabbits, Chuck and Sarah's will they won't they feels increasingly like forced drama as season 2 goes on. Sarah has a tendency to be needlessly callous when discussing her duties on Team Chuck and her relationship to Mr. Bartowski, conversations which Chuck, of course, always manages to overhear only the most insensitive parts of. Meanwhile, Chuck is trapped in an endless cycle of learning, forgetting, and then relearning the lesson that his cover life romance with Sarah has no future and they'd be better off broken up.
And that's why I think we should break up.
Is that what you really want?
Yes, it is.
Great. Most annoying romance of my life is finally over.
In the writer's defense, a minor amount of the show's seemingly forgetting and then retreading familiar ground is Barack Obama's fault. No, I'm not joking. Obama gave his first public address before a joint session the night Chuck vs. the Best Friend was supposed to air, so NBC pushed the episode back. But since the following episode, Chuck vs. the Suburbs, was a Valentine's Day episode, they kept that airing next week so it would air on Valentine's Day, and pushed Chuck vs. the Best Friend back 2 weeks, which meant the season not only aired out of order, but to this day still appears on streaming services out of order. So instead of Chuck learning he and Sarah can never be in Chuck vs. the Suburbs, and then breaking up with her immediately at the start of the intended next episode, Chuck vs. the Beefcake, there's an entire episode in between where the two reflect on the value of their friendship to each other, then Chuck blindsides the audience and dumps her right after. Thanks, Obama.
Since the new administration discontinued waterboarding, Fulcrum agents don't talk.
Perhaps the most frustrating arc comes when Adonis British spy, Cole Barker, temporarily joins the team just after Chuck dumped Sarah, and Chuck spends 2 entire episodes a pathetic, sputtering emotional mess because Sarah kissed Cole once, despite Sarah having to just take it in stride while Chuck jumps into bed with every brunette in Los Angeles County. Besides his sister.
Tell me why I so need a cute girl my age. Tell me why I never want to hear you say I have a boyfriend.
While Chuck's struggles to get the dream girl were more of a thing that connected with pubescent me, and now leaves adult me cold, I'm happy to report that the rest of the overarching plot lines of Season 2 are rock solid. The capers of the week are already a marked improvement over Season 1, and the narrative through lines stringing episode after episode together only add further excitement and momentum to Chuck's sophomore year. Chuck wants to be free of the intersect, so he can stop constantly living a life of danger, duplicity, and anxiety. But the United States government doesn't have the same endgame in mind. In fact, they have no endgame in mind, given the continued success of Operation Bartowski, busting the bad guy week after week. They want to keep it going in perpetuity. General Beckman's like, oh, no. This is what we do now. This is who we are.
What if Orion can help Chuck remove the intersect, erase it from his mind?
That's exactly what I don't want. Chuck Bartowski is absolutely vital to national security. He can never meet Orion.
Since the government isn't going to save Chuck from the Intersect, it means Chuck is going to have to save himself. Fortunately, he's not flying completely solo, and the lead developer of the Intersect, codenamed Orion, sends Chuck secret messages to aid him in his secret mission. Fulcrum is building an Intersect of their own, and if Chuck can hijack it, he can use it to purge the government secrets from his mind.
You will need to understand that computer if you want to get the Intersect out of your head. And yes, it's possible. If you can find Fulcrum's Intersect, if you can get inside, you could get your old life back.
Chuck also leaves the Bymore to take a job at Rourke Instruments, the high-paying adult daycare tech gig he'd always dreamed he'd land post-Stanford, only for the dream gig to become a real you-only-move-twice situation where it turns out his boss, Ted Rourke, is the leader of Fulcrum and intent on world domination. Actually, Chuck the series has a terrible, terrible habit of never giving villains real motivations, which is especially perplexing for a series aping James Bond tropes. World domination, that's all projection on my end. The implication is Fulcrum plans to take over the US government and roll with some sort of hyper-aggressive foreign policy, but Chuck is absolutely starving for a Rocketeer-esque projection show that explains what the bad guy's endgame is. I get that Fulcrum, and later The Ring, do bad things, but it's much more exciting to watch shows where the villains have some sort of deliciously evil goal, so audiences can thrill at the heroes spoiling it. For example, some stuff we've seen on the channel before.
On our command, the world governments will loose their nuclear arsenals and the world will be made anew.
Nuclear?
End of the world.
And when the works accidentally go off, when I hit the final note of my awesome guitar solo, they'll burn up the school's records and all evidence of my misdeeds.
You're going to eat him with my face?
Yes.
At the same time, Sister Ellie and her fiancé, Captain Awesome, are planning for their upcoming wedding. And Chuck decides to exploit the CIA that has inconvenienced him so much to convenience himself for once and track down their deadbeat dad, so their dad can walk Ellie down the aisle. The Bartowski children are happy to have their old man back, though they're still working through the animosity they feel due to him walking out on them all those years back. Chuck's regrowing relationship with his father is only strained further when he learns he's a former collaborator and rival of Ted Rourke, and the swanky new job that should make him a success in his father's eyes instead makes him a sellout. And on top of that, there's a question of just how long Papa Bartowski is going to stick around, since he's been living off-grid for a decade and seems like a real crackpot, always going on about incredible inventions he's made and how shadowy organizations are conspiring to track him down. Yeah, 3 guesses who Orion is. Chuck's reunion with his father, the conflict it generates at his new job, and his spy life forcing him to sacrifice yet another golden opportunity are all exciting directions to take the series. Honestly, my only complaint is that the series could have spent a little more time with it. Chuck's fired from Rourke Instruments the same day he starts, and Stephen Bartowski is revealed as Orion and kidnapped by Ted Rourke less than an hour after we see him reunited with Chuck. So, while it makes for an explosive episode of television, I do think Chuck could have gotten a lot more mileage out of the whole Chuck taking a new job and leaving the Bymore character opportunities. Especially since Chuck Bartowski has had very, very little interaction with the Bymore and its employees over the course of Season 2. See, the Bymore used to serve this coming back to Earth function for Chuck, whether last night was exciting, heartbreaking, sensual, or nightmarish. You gotta clock in tomorrow morning and do your menial job like nothing's going on. Then of course there were the plants in the B story that would pay off in the A story and allow Chuck to save the day using some sort of unconventional everyman method. Season 2 still has a handful of such payoffs, but Chuck himself is rarely privy to them, because in Season 2, when there are Bymore B-plots, Chuck isn't a part of them. The Bymore supporting cast certainly still have their moments, and the introduction of Tony Hale as the store's duplicitous new assistant manager, Emmett Milbarge, with an evil scheme to steal Big Mike's job, is a welcome addition. But since Chuck is so divorced from the nation of Bymoria, a lot of the gang's antics feel like I accidentally sat on the remote and switched over to a completely different show. Not like Chuck is ever, face-meltingly tense or anything, but sometimes the spy plots have some really exciting momentum going on, only for the buy more B plot to come across as a complete distraction.
Okay, so how are we feeling about this whole Employee of the Month thing?
You know what? Whatever, Morgan. I don't really care.
There are 4 exceptions to this. The big Buy More Chocolate and Spy World peanut butter episode is the legendary Chuck vs. Santa Claus, in which a hostage situation unfolds at the Buy More with some ordinary crook who has no idea 2 of the civvies inside are secretly trained assassins who could whoop his ass, all with an ever-evolving secret fulcrum plot to suss out who Sarah and Casey are protecting within the store and abduct them. Oh Little Town of Bethlehem is a masterpiece.
He is a civilian. No record, not even a speeding ticket in the past 10 years.
Well, Nathan picked himself the wrong place to be naughty instead of nice.
Chuck vs. Tom Sawyer proudly indulges in the nerd culture that the show has always ostensibly been about, though I think this was one of the first times Chuck was less about trying to make nerd culture cool, and more about just indulging in it and having fun with it. Dorkiness be damned. With doomsday weapon abort codes hidden in the end screen of Missile Command, Chuck has to pull former Missile Command world record holder Jeff out of retirement so he can beat the unbeatable game before World War III kicks off. It's a ton of schlocky fun.
Do we carry any Rush CDs in the store?
No need, I got them all on my Zune.
You have a Zune?
Are you kidding me? No, I'll grab my iPod.
On the more mixed bag front is Chuck vs. the Predator. Orion has shipped a Predator commanding laptop to Chuck to aid him in case of emergency, but the Buy More staff get their hands on it first and presume it's a gaming PC. Would you like to play a game? The show is starting to veer into the Chuck's friends are idiot liabilities who just cause trouble for him trope, but the sequence where Lester and Jeff break into the Buy More to steal the laptop back at the same time as Sarah and Casey is some wacky fun.
Listen, I thought I lost you. Oh, I'm scared, man. I think I wet my pants. Just a little.
Last and least is Chuck versus the best friend. While some episodes of Season 2 wrestle with Morgan's burgeoning maturity, the big Morgan Focus episode unfortunately has the character at his most unsympathetic. Morgan's ex Anna is dating a new guy, who Chuck flashes on and realizes is linked to a triad. But since Morgan is stalking Anna, he winds up in the triad's crosshairs, and Chuck has to bail him out. Not only is Morgan sleazy and annoying in this episode, but Chuck is too. He and Sarah have to go on a double date with Anna and her new boyfriend in order to do recon on the guy, and Chuck acts like it's the biggest betrayal to his friendship with Morgan ever. Hey idiot, you're going on this mission so you can get evidence to throw Morgan's ex's new boyfriend in jail forever. That's some next level wingman shit. Beyond just that episode, Big Mike meets Morgan's mom on a dating app. And since Morgan still lives with his mother, Big Mike's repeated nightly visits start to make Morgan's living situation, well, unlivable. There are 2 episodes with B-plots about Morgan finding and signing the lease on an apartment with Anna this season, only for him to still be living with his mother the next episode. Weird.
Michael, my son works here.
Lord, let it be Bartowski.
Fortunately, Morgan has a solid win back the crowd storyline at the tail end of the season, in which he's manipulated by, and ultimately stands up to, Emmett. After Emmett's plot to overthrow the boss man comes to fruition, Morgan triumphantly quits the Buy More and leaves to pursue his dream of becoming a hibachi chef at Benihana. Me too, buddy. Me too. Meanwhile, over in the spy world, with Chuck's father captured and Chuck releasing Jill from captivity in exchange for information, without the consent of his handlers, the government has decided that the Great Chuck experiment is more trouble than it's worth. Mr. Bartowski now belongs in a padded cell.
Permission to drop the torp into a deep dark hole, General.
Granted.
Huh?
It's over. The Human Intersect Project has become too hard to control.
Unwilling to exploit Chuck's trust in her, Sarah tips Chuck off that the feds are after him, and the couple goes on the lam to look for Chuck's father, nearly consummating their relationship along the way, only for Chuck to learn Morgan pilfered the condoms from his wallet and ruined his chance with Sarah yet again. I mentioned feeling tired of the will they won't they over the course of Season 2. But that final rug pull to keep Sarah and Chuck from finally forming a two-person Voltron was so unexpected, cruel, and hilarious that I have to applaud it. The NSA goes, unleash the Casey. Since Sarah and Chuck went AWOL, he no longer holds the reservations regarding murder he held in the season premiere. Dead or alive, they're coming with him. And the stakes only get higher when Captain Awesome mistakes Casey for a stalker of Chuck's and stumbles on his home base.
We need to talk. I get it, dude. You know, there was a time in my life that I didn't have a lot going on either. Dead-end job, no girl. Really? Well, no, John.
Sarah and Chuck arrive just in time to save Awesome from Casey's wrath, and Devon becomes the first civilian, besides, hilariously, Season 1's Harry Tang, to learn the truth about Chuck's double life. When Casey learns the military is going to bomb the elder Bartowski's current location rather than risk a rescue mission, he has a change of heart and joins up with Chuck and Sarah. The trio rescue Orion, who hijacks the Fulcrum Intersect to deprogram Chuck, and Ted Rourke's Fulcrum Army gets nuked from orbit. All in all, the penultimate episode of Season 2 is an absolute thrill ride, with a brief yet impactful glimpse of a villainous Casey, a major relationship dynamic shift, and Awesome learning the truth, Chuck and Sarah closer to getting it on than ever before, and the resolution of the core premise of the series. What a rush.
You need serious psychiatric help. John? Whoa, John, what are you doing, man? Put the gun away, dude. Bro, take another step and I will drop you.
After Chuck versus the Colonel, the finale of Season 2 is really one big victory lap. Chuck and Casey triumphantly quit the Buy-More, Ted Rourke comes back for one last shot at revenge, the showdown ruins Ellie and Awesome's wedding, so Chuck uses his CIA payout package to put on a second, much better wedding. And, despite Sarah's next assignment teaming her back up with Bryce, Sarah lets Bryce know she intends to leave the spy life behind and stay in town with Chuck. Bryce is due to receive the Intersect 2.0, but a new terrorist organization known as The Ring shows up, kills the captive Ted Rourke, and kills Bryce. Chuck beats The Ring to the punch and uploads the new Intersect himself before destroying it, with the big cliffhanger for next season being that the new Intersect doesn't just upload information to your brain, it uploads skills.
Kill him.
So that's Season 2 of Chuck. Despite my bitching and moaning about some of the show Bible elements that are wearing a tad thin, it's a step up from the first season in terms of both episode-to-episode storytelling and season-long narrative storytelling, despite being a clear case of not knowing if they'd get a third season renewal, or maybe precisely because of that. The two-part finale of Season 2 was equal parts spectacular as a conclusion and enticing as a status quo shake-up cliffhanger. Much to the delight of Chuck fans around the world, the series would receive a third season, despite some dicey prospects, though just how much the status quo would actually change as a result of Morgan, Casey, and Chuck quitting the Buy-More, Sarah finally choosing Chuck over her spy life, and the spectacular new capabilities of the Intersect 2.0, well, we'll get to that.
The Intersect 2.0 was designed to go into a real spy, like Bryce Larkin, someone in complete control of their feelings.
What are you saying?
It's over.
Season 3 jumps forward 6 months after the conclusion of Season 2, and all is not well in the City of Angels. Chuck was presented with a choice between running away with Sarah or utilizing his newfound powers to become a real secret agent. He chose poorly, and selected the spy job, only to wash out of training due to Intersect impotence brought on by his conflicted emotions, making him unable to flash. So now an unemployed Chuck spends his days rotting away back at his sister's house, lamenting the fact that he threw away his relationship with Sarah over nothing. Meanwhile, Morgan washed out of Benihana training, and Anna left him. A bit of an open secret that the actress was slashed from the cast to pinch on pennies. Emmett's tyranny at the beat-into-submission Buy-More is only amplified when he gets the chance to publicly humiliate 2 employees who walked out last year to follow their dreams, since those dreams both ended in failure.
Oh, Chuck Bartowski? Oh, how the mighty have fallen.
and deep below the orange, a now Chuckless Team Chuck goes through the motions of missions while screening Mr. Bartowski's desperate calls to be given another chance, both to go on assignments and to explain himself to Sarah. As far as season setups go, this is pretty compelling stuff. After such a triumphant ending in Chuck vs. the Ring, opening season 3 with all the characters in such a grim place is both tragic but also promising for the season as the audience can anticipate their eventual victories as they claw their way back from the brink of despair. Like watching a Don Bluth movie as a kid. The happy ending is all the sweeter because you made it through the sad stuff and the scary stuff. The big question on everybody's minds, I'm sure, is why would Chuck choose the spy gig over Sarah? That's about as out of character as Walter White actually doing something for the good of his family, especially given one of the major plot points of the previous season was the revelation that despite saving the day from comically evil supervillains who want to destroy the world, the CIA themselves are pretty morally questionable and aren't exactly the good guys. Shocker! That discovery will ultimately be the motivation behind Season 3's big bad's villainous turn, and throughout the season, Chuck is tasked with some morally icky espionage missions that after 2 years in the field, he has no right to feel caught off guard by. Fortunately, the writers do put in some legwork to explain this out-of-character choice that cocked up Chuck's love life yet again, explaining that Chuck believed Sarah had fallen for him because of his growth as a competent spy, when, in truth, to use superhero terms, she fell for the man, not the cape. It's a stretch, given how long Chuck has been longing to return to normalcy and get out of the line of fire, but Zachary Levi goes the extra mile to sell it, so, I'll allow it.
And you're the one that taught me that being a spy is about choosing something bigger. It's about putting aside your own personal feelings for the greater good, and that's what I chose.
If you can get past Chuck's choice there, there's two problems with this darkest timeline the Chuck cast find themselves in. First and foremost, I'm gonna be honest, the events of the preceding 6 months, only alluded to via flashback, seem like they might have made for a more interesting season of television than what we're actually watching. And second, the reset button gets absolutely smashed at the conclusion of the 3rd season premiere, when the strength of the previous season finale was partially how much the status quo was disrupted. Chuck returning to the status quo after a single episode, not even, say, a half season, like the 2nd season of Party Down, is a problem. Especially when elements of that status quo were already feeling mighty tired last season. Chuck is accepted back into the ranks of the CIA. His relationship with Sarah is once again on uncertain will they won't they grounds, since they both like each other but have a new reason to not become a couple. Chuck's inability to get his flashes up under duress means he can still hem and haw about not being a real spy when the rubber hits the road, and Chuck, Morgan, and Casey all return to work at the Bymore. Even the management at the Bymore returns to the pre-Chuck vs. Colonel status quo, with Emmett Milbarge running afoul of the premiere's villain of the week and catching a bullet through the eyeball. Seems a little dark for you, Chuck, although the scene is certainly attention-grabbing. And I mean, it could have been an earned dark moment, either by using it to establish a greater recurring foe's dangerous potential, instead of a villain who will be defeated at the end of the hour and never heard from again, or as a comeuppance to Emmett after, lots of assholery. I get that he pulled a dirty trick on Morgan and Big Mike at the end of season 2, and is a sore winner about the whole situation, but god damn. Having his murder swept under the rug by Casey, so no other characters even know about his fate, is pretty tonally jarring for this series, especially given the more lighthearted fate of his predecessor Harry Tang, who wound up with a cushy witness protection payoff.
Are you too crazy? What? No, I'm not gonna have a guy rubbed out just because he upsets our lunch routine.
The one reset button that is not pushed is Captain Awesome. Since he hasn't fallen out of any towers or flown through any windshields lately, he still remembers Chuck's secret. And while it's a relief to Chuck that he finally has a normal civilian he could vent to, this double life doesn't suit Straight Arrow Awesome. Keeping secrets turns out to be the least of his worries, however, when the Ring understandably mistakes Awesome as the spy in the family, affixes a bomb to his head, and sends him on an assassination mission. An assassination mission that he is, of course, woefully untrained for. It's a glimpse of the spark Chuck could have if it were a bit more daring in its season-by-season shifts and dynamics. Watching the role reversal as Chuck plays the Sarah and Casey role and Awesome plays the Chuck role is, say it with me, awesome.
Down the hall to your left is an unmarked door. The lock opens via retina scan. Cut out one of the guard's eyes and use it to open the door.
What? We gotta cut out one of these guys' eyes for the scan.
Captain Awesome's less than awesome hit turns out to be a just as planned sort of thing, orchestrated by the CIA's expert in all things Ring, Daniel Shaw. After faking his demise, he squirrels away in Team Chuck's base and takes over their operation. As Sarah's new handler, let's just say Shaw is interested in a very hands-on approach, if you know what I mean. Oh, I forgot you can't see me. I'm making the boob-squeezing gesture. And as Chuck's new handler, he's taking a very hands-off approach, dropping him into sink-or-swim solo missions out of fear that Sarah and Casey have been coddling him, typically with disastrous results.
The ring agent's gonna find you because you picked the single dumbest place to hide. Scream like a banshee so he doesn't think you're a threat. When he pulls you out, you find a weapon and then flash.
What if I don't flash?
Then you're dead. So flash.
As I mentioned earlier, these missions tend to be more morally gray than the black and white Sunday morning adventures Team Chuck has previously been on. Work an asset, send a guy who knows too much to a padded cell forever, kill a mole. Chuck also mistakes John Casey committing treason to save his imperiled ex-lover as a secret test of character, blindly selling his friend out, assuming it was all staged by Shaw and there will be no repercussions. Only for Casey to wind up stripped of his rank and stuck working at the Bymore as a civilian.
First it was the solo mission on the plane, then turning an asset. Now this time it's, Chuck, will you betray your country or will you turn in your friend and partner John Casey for stealing the pill? I'll play ball, okay? Guilty. He did it.
Speaking of the Bymore, with Chuck now officially on the CIA's payroll as an international man of mystery, why on earth is his cover the Bymore? He's flying all over the globe this season, hence the international and the whole international man of mystery title, and all the people in his social life are poking all kinds of holes in his half-assed cover stories explaining how and why he's doing it. From an audience perspective, the Bymore was becoming blatant filler material as Season 2 went along. It was kind of a relief when the writers signaled that we were going to be done with it in the Season 2 finale. But now with Chuck not just across town, but in other countries while the Bymore B stories are unfolding, they're more tedious than ever. Even the plant and payoff elements that used to be reliably clever and unexpected are getting weary and lazy.
Lester turned the cage into a fight club and attached a battery to the fence so he can shock people.
Oh, well, golly gee shucks. I wonder if that's going to come back at the fucking climax. And now 2 of the Bymore regulars have been written out of the show. Guess the point I'm getting at isn't why do we still have the Bymore at all when everyone, even the writers, seem to be over it, but more, why does the Bymore have to get a B-plot every episode? Not that it's entirely true. There are a handful of episodes in Season 3 where the Bymore and its inhabitants simply don't appear, and their absence is not felt. So here's my armchair screenwriter pitch. Morgan and Chuck are roommates now, and the interactions between them this season all revolve around Chuck hiding his secret from Morgan and hooking up with a girl Morgan was pining after. Read, stalking. So the scene where the show tries to make you feel bad for Morgan falls totally flat, because stalking is bad, kids. My point being, that girl could have just been like their neighbor, not a coworker. Chuck could just be a full-time spy, and Morgan could be working at a Benihana, and almost none of their interactions this season would change. If anything, we could have new, fresh dynamics at a Benihana. But we can still rope the Bymore cast in when they'd be relevant to the plot, with Morgan enlisting Jeff and Lester to keep tabs on Chuck to try and deduce what he's hiding from him, and with John Casey forced to return to stocking shelves following his teensy-weensy act of treason. In fact, Casey's fall from grace would have been even more impactful if the writers kept the Bymore in their back pocket until then. Of all the men who quit the Bymore at the end of Season 3, it was the one who went in a spy that, depressingly, found himself crawling back.
I'm really learning to enjoy my new life here.
Are you kidding me? John, your old life was so exciting. The adventures, the missions, the weaponry, the women.
Please stop.
There is, of course, one major upside to keeping Chuck and Morgan at the Bymore, and that upside is the episode Chuck vs. the Beard. With Chuck finding it all but impossible to flash due to his continued mental distress, he's benched while Shaw, Sarah, and Casey leave on a mission to babysit Awesome. Just as Chuck and Morgan's friendship is on the precipice of collapse, buyers arrive to inspect the Bymore before taking it over. You never see it coming, but the buyers are actually secretly ring operatives, and Morgan's eavesdropping in an effort to deduce the fate of the store only manages to uncover their ulterior motives and the CIA's base below the premises.
I know that sounds crazy, but you have to believe me here, okay? These people who are claiming to buy the store, they're bad guys, okay? And they call themselves the Ring, which I know is like, ooh, not that scary, but trust me, these guys are not to be messed with.
Shaw and Co. race to rescue Chuck after realizing they've been hoodwinked. The Buy More staff stage a lockdown protest after misinterpreting just what kind of termination the Ring has waiting for them, and Chuck finally lets Morgan know the truth behind everything as they're facing the gallows. It's an episode that combines the Chuck and the Buy More without backup facing off against an actually deadly threat excitement from Chuck versus the Santa Claus with the letting a major character in on the masquerade relationship shakeup potential of Chuck versus the Colonel. So, well, you gotta slog through a handful of fairly uninspired Buy More B stories to get to it. Chuck versus the Beard is an absolute barn burner. Also, armchair screenwriter again, if you're gonna kill Emmett, this is probably the episode where you want to do it. I don't know, maybe have him try to save his own skin when he figures out what's going on, sell the team out to the Ring, only for the Ring to do a whole rewarded as a traitor deserves thing. I'm just spitballing here.
Is your whole relationship a fake? Cause, buddy, this is awful.
Why? Because we never had sex?
Oh, man, I just feel like, you never had sex with that girl.
Since Morgan's moral support provides Chuck with the emotional stability he needs to reliably use the intersect again, General Beckman holds off on calling Witsec. He's got the best friend, and he's about to get the girl too. Learning Chuck didn't have the heart to pull the trigger during his license to kill test, Sarah is reassured that Chuck hasn't lost himself to the ruthlessness of spy life and chooses him over Shaw.
There's a very good chance I'm making a complete fool of myself, isn't there?
Yes.
I should probably put some pants on.
No, Chuck. Yes.
While Chuck's emotional stability is on the rise, Shaw's is going down in flames when the Ring reveals to him that Sarah killed his wife as part of her CIA initiation. While the CIA handwaves the hit as, the Ring must have swapped her target, in truth, the CIA was just being paranoid per usual and killed Shaw's wife on the incorrect suspicion she might be a Ring operative. Now bent on revenge against both Sarah and the CIA as a whole, Shaw motions like he's going to get revenge on Sarah, but then always turns out to be completely innocent, leading Chuck to cry wolf one too many times. As a result, Beckman takes away Chuck's keys to the big red reinforcements button, and with Chuck effectively disarmed, Shaw then puts his real plan into action. He flies Sarah to Paris, drugs her, hands over intersex schematics to the Ring to aid them in their struggles against the CIA, and plans to shoot Sarah on the same spot where she made him a widower all those years ago. Chuck races to Paris, guns down Shaw, and he and Sarah finally get together, while Casey has his rank reinstated after tagging along with Chuck and catching the Ring director after his little rendezvous with Shaw. I was going to say after his little meeting with Shaw, but then I remembered it happened in France. Chuck versus the Other Guy is another climactic and spectacular episode, and while Shaw's face-heel turn does feel a tad like it occurs out of narrative obligation, the episode as a whole pays off long-simmering plot lines from the series in a satisfying way.
But this time I'm right for the right reasons, and I have proof.
Hi there.
What is he doing there?
Chuck versus the Other Guy had to be satisfying, because the episode was intended as a definitive series finale when it was produced. Though, as discussed previously, not only would the series be renewed, but the season would be extended another 6 episodes. So, while it was nice to have more Chuck, it's safe to say the spectacular spectacle Chuck versus the Other Guy dropped the mic, then the writers had to come back and pick it up again. And when you've definitively wrapped up your series, by making the main couple official and killing your latest big bad guy, you're left in this awkward position of asking, so where do we go from here? So the first couple episodes back, the series is extremely breezy and lighthearted as Chuck and Sarah celebrate the honeymoon stage of their relationship, initially intending to give up the spy life before realizing they just enjoy it too much and going right back to it. The problem is, in the wake of all this resolution, and with no new stakes, I'm losing investment fast. Kind of feels like the series ended and they just forgot to turn the cameras off. So, to keep audiences glued to the screen, Chuck slams on the narrative gas pedal. Some of the plot points are rushed, but it certainly beats the meandering of the first few episodes post Shaw's demise. The Intersect is driving Chuck slowly insane, and only Orion can save him. Ellie learns her father is a spy, and is duped by the Ring into believing Casey is a terrorist out to get him. Oh, and Shaw? He didn't hear no bell, and after drying off from his little swim, he downloads an Intersect of his own and activates a bunch of Ring agents planted throughout the government to seize control of the CIA.
We checked for a pulse, right?
Well, he fell into a river.
He fell into a river? Of course Shaw's alive. Haven't you ever seen a John Carpenter movie?
The plot points come at you hard and fast, but I'll always appreciate the times Chuck is flying through plot points at ludicrous speed, seemingly because the writers are worried about getting to a satisfying conclusion before the show's inevitable cancellation, over the later seasons where there's way more episodes than there is material. It's up to Team Chuck to save the government from Shaw. But when it all comes down to Shaw versus Chuck in a flash-to-flash fist fight, Shaw takes a shocking second option.
You can't function when your emotions have been compromised.
Don't worry about that. I've never been more calm.
Really? How are you feeling now?
With Team Chuck in cuffs, it's up to the B team to save the day. The civvies who know about Team Chuck, but shouldn't. Morgan, Awesome, and the recently looped-in Ellie, out to avenge her father, rescue the Dream Team from captivity. Chuck tricks Shaw into publicly unveiling his master plot, and the two have a final showdown at the Buy More, set to music by Jeff and Lester's cover band, and concluding with the store being burned to the ground. The show pulled out all the fan service stops in its third pseudo-series finale, because surely, it's over for good this time. Right? Well, no. Chuck got another season, again. So that's season 3 of Chuck. It's a season defined by its event episodes, and they are indeed standout event episodes. But between the writers abruptly hitting the reset button in the season premiere, and the two new core emotional beats of I can't flash because of my emotions, and I can't love Chuck if he becomes a real spy, getting old real fast, it's harder to appreciate the event episodes as the events they are, and instead come to rely on them as shots of adrenaline to string your attention along as you drag yourself through the season's filler material. Speaking of filler material, we're going into season 4, the longest of the 5 Chuck seasons. Treasure that final shot of adrenaline season 3 gave you with its finale. It's gonna have to last you a while. After his death at the hands of Shaw, Stephen Bartowski left Chuck a secret Orion bunker, with one objective in mind: take over the search for my missing wife. Your missing mother, who, you may want to sit down for this, was also a spy. Despite promising his sister that he would give up the spy game after taking down Shaw, Chuck picks up where his father left off, and learns that his mother is a deep cover agent for sinister Russian black market arms dealer Volkov Industries. Though when they do reunite, she has a tendency to repeatedly leave Chuck holding the bag, supposedly to maintain her evil cover, but possibly because she's secretly gone to the dark side. The globe-trotting search puts Chuck into massive debt, and things go from bad to worse when he's unable to land any job in the San Fernando Valley. Except for one. General Beckman came to town, blackmailed every interviewer so Chuck would remain on the market, and demands he returns to the spy game, with the burned-down Buy More now reconstructed and purpose-built as the CIA's Los Angeles FOB, fucking operating base.
General, I am out of the spy game.
You're out when I say you're out.
If memory serves, you actually said, Chuck, you are out of the spy game.
I changed my mind. You're back. Discussion over.
In contrast to Chuck on the Rocks to heighten the premiere's emotional stakes, the preceding season, the 40 grand in debt, and forced return to spy life are all played for laughs. And of course, it isn't long before the Buy More that exists solely as a government front hires back Jeff, Lester, and Big Mike in an effort to maintain the illusion. With Big Mike back, it means the Big Mike discussing having relations with Morgan's mother with zero tact jokes are back too, for the 3rd year running. I mean, the guy's practically a stepfather to Morgan now. They don't even live together or anything, but hardy har har, he's doing your mom. That's still funny. right? Apparently, parent-child awkward sex discussions do just crack the writers up, because Casey's long-lost daughter comes to town and starts shacking up with Morgan, much to the grunting Colonel's chagrin. It's a shame, because Casey has pretty reliably had both the best one-liners and the least mawkish focus episodes in years prior. But now that most of the B stories revolving around him have to do with his discomfort around daughter Alex and mentorship of Morgan, he's less of a guaranteed show stealer from episode to episode. Morgan and Alex aren't the only couple sitting in a tree. Of course, we've got Chuck and Sarah, paired off ever since Chuck versus the other guy. The Chuck writers fall into the all-too-common sitcom trap of assuming resolving the core will-they-won't-they relationship will siphon the drama out of the series, instead continuing the relationship conflict with the mindset, once you do get the girl, you just bicker and fight for the rest of your life as the result of extremely poor communication. I mean, yeah, truer words were never spoken, but the farcical misunderstandings that lead to each fight are frustrating as hell, and Chuck and Sarah's spats are neither emotionally relatable nor comically entertaining. They're soul-draining.
Precious looks and whimsical little makeups after big misunderstandings, you guys are fantastic, sure, but actual, real, live, day-to-day open communication about your feelings? I get it.
My use of the term soul-draining, and a lot of my language discussing Season 4 in general so far, may have tipped you off to the fact that I don't like Season 4 very much. The first few episodes of the season are absolutely atrocious. Staring down the barrel of 24 episodes operating at that reduced level of quality, I was genuinely tempted to mothball this entire video, especially when the series started retreading character conflicts that were core to the preceding season and should be done and dusted. Ellie is out of the loop, but Awesome is in on the spy stuff, again, as a result of Chuck's lie to give her peace of mind. One episode after we got Ellie on board. Oh, and Chuck's mom shows him a secret device that's definitely not a PSP that the props department glued some shit to, that suppresses the intersect. So we're doing Chuck can't use the intersect because of emotional inhibitions, and Chuck is worried Sarah won't love him if he's no longer a spy? Again? Poor communicators, I know. But Sarah was pretty damn clear where she stood on that latter issue. It was the central arc of the preceding season.
That's not the reason why I love Chuck. I do want to spend the rest of my life with Chuck, with or without the intersect.
That's fantastic. That's great. Yeah, and he knows that, right? Because you told him that.
These big, broad missteps quickly sap my goodwill for the series, and as a consequence, even the smaller issues become galling. Like, even when he is able to flash, Chuck doesn't have any fun skill flashes anymore. It's all kung fu, all the time, which really makes you wonder if he, or the writers, are getting their money's worth from the Intersect 2.0. I can only imagine those poor Intersect scientists slaved away night and day, coding in stuff like animal tracking, TIG welding, and ventriloquism, when they could have just programmed in kung fu in an afternoon and called it finished. Then just sit around the Intersect lab for 30 years, waiting to collect your pension. Take 3-hour lunches, leave at noon on Fridays, start drinking at work. You're good. Even old reliable Subway is getting tired. At least Community started to riff on the sponsorship in increasingly outlandish ways. There's only so many times you can see a brazen ad for Subway inserted into the show, with the joke only being lol lol lol, look how shameless we're being about it, before it starts to grate. Especially watching live, I'm already sitting through ads during the breaks. You're really gonna sink that low and put an ad right in the middle of the content? Surfshark VPN, remember to use code SLIPMAKER. Fortunately, even at this low point, there are rays of hope that harken back to the glory days and remind me why I loved Chuck in the first place. The first is a Casey Focus episode, where he flushes out an evil riff on the A-Team, who have had it out for him ever since he court-martialed them by staging his own funeral, which is not only the first halfway decent caper in the mix this season, but also ties Jeff and Lester into the plot in a pretty creative way. Casey accidentally calls them for help while recovering from his death-faking drug, and they assist while just assuming he's been on some kind of unholy bender.
In an alley, 4th and Hill. I'll be in a dumpster.
Don't worry, Casey. I know that dumpster.
Wait, who is this? Where's Chuck?
The guest stars this season also put some color back in the show's cheeks, even if they are incredibly self-indulgent. It's a roster of actors who played iconic 80s roles, playing characters extremely referential to those 80s roles, which can be fun, but how do I put this? Sometimes it feels like the production team were trying to entertain themselves more than an audience. Does that make sense?
Come with me if you want to live.
Come with me if you want to live.
So you are afraid of something after all, huh? This nightmare you never wake up from.
If he dies, he dies.
If you die, you die.
I must break you.
I must break you.
The one guest star played against type from his iconic 80s role is Timothy Dalton, with his iconic 80s role, of course, being James Bond. In Chuck, he plays Gregory Tuttle, an ineffectual MI6 handler with reams of book smarts but zero field experience. He and Chuck wind up captured by Volkov Industries, and Dalton turns in a hilarious performance as the world's least intimidating G-man, who walks away from every encounter with the enemy, both shaken and stirred.
I'll tell you everything you want.
No, don't!
My home address is 17 Tully Place. My dog's name is Kipper, and I had my first sexual experience watching Lawrence of Arabia.
Chuck lets his guard down to Tuttle, which turns out to have been part of the plan all along. See, the nebbish personality was all a ruse, and Tuttle is in fact the evil mastermind behind Volkov Industries, Alexei Volkov. With the aid of Chuck's mother, Volkov destroys Orion's bunker, and even puts the Intersect on ice thanks to the aforementioned brainwashing PSP of Doom. And with Chuck versus the First Fight's villain introduction, Season 4 finally has a spring in its step. Volkov only becomes more endearing when it's revealed he and Chuck's mother are an item, and in return for sparing Chuck's life, he rather comically demands to be invited to Thanksgiving dinner with the Bartowskis, since he wants to feel like part of the family.
You didn't think I could have a relationship with your family? Kids love me.
Alexei Volkov was an inspired addition to the show. I guess what I'm trying to say in so many words is, whenever Volkov isn't on the screen, all of the other characters should be asking, where's Volkov? Unfortunately, he does lose some of his villainous luster in the show's fourth fake-out finale, Chuck vs. the Push Mix, where he's brought down simply by falling for all the typical contrived villain pitfalls, blindly trusting a previously moral character has turned evil and joined their ranks, leaving extremely vital and dangerous heroes in the care of a handful of inept henchmen, and asking your private army to sit on the sidelines while you go off to have your final showdown with the protagonist, alone and unarmed.
Wait a minute. Surely he knows that the mafia boss is a psycho. Why would he believe he'd show up alone and unarmed? You know?
Yeah.
In the fourth season's defense, the third season finale's showdown with Shaw relied on a lot of the same or similar villain dropping the ball in the third act tropes, but they were a lot easier to swallow when the series was being tongue-in-cheek and self-referential about it, instead of sincerely presenting it like Chuck was pulling off some monumentally clever plan.
What are you doing here? What's your plan?
I'm sorry, are you asking me to make the classic villain mistake of explaining my dastardly plot to you?
After Volkov's defeat, Chuck Season 4 enters its obligatory, unplanned, fly-by-the-seat-of-your-pants second half. While shuffling the big villain tying everything together off the board did make the series truly aimless, I did find the second half of the season easier to stomach than the first. Maybe I've just been beaten into submission and I've lowered the bar to merely tolerable episodes being acceptable, but the writers at least have caught on that the incessant infighting of Sarah and Chuck was making their relationship, and the show as a whole, a drag. The second half is much more organic and endearing with the pair, with their only minor disagreements coming from playful spats, such as Sarah showing Chuck what his flash face looks like.
Like that.
Chuck and Sarah playing nice makes the season more palatable, and on top of that there are a handful of one-off creative episode concepts, like Sarah and Chuck unwittingly starting a nationwide manhunt for a lady who scammed them when they attempted to exploit CIA resources to get their money back, or the whodunit mystery, where characters are getting picked off one by one, gradually coming to mistrust one another as they try to suss out the assassin in their midst, all while the assassin is sneaking through the air vents and cutting power to the lights and doors.
Who would do this?
Nobody's been in Castle for a week besides us, Bentley, and the recruits. That means the killer is still among us.
Don't you dare comment it. When it comes to what the back half of Season 4 is actually about, as I said, it's fairly aimless, but with a sorta thematic through line. Chuck and Sarah are now engaged, and in preparation for the wedding, all the characters are digging up relationships from their pasts to bury the hatchet. Casey reuniting with his ex-lover and revealing he faked his death, Sarah reuniting with her former Charlie's Angels-esque spy squad, Beckman rekindling her love affair with Season 2's seduction expert Roan, and most critically, Vivian Volkov, learning what sort of shady business her distant father was in, and becoming more and more like her dear old dad as she attempts to arrange a prison visit to confront him. Vivian takes to the villainous lifestyle so well that the show's attempts to portray her as a sympathetic figure definitely ring hollow. I mean, she leaps to the conclusion of, I should bomb Team Chuck's base and kill every one of them, so quickly you get the impression that after inheriting her father's evil assets, she was just looking for any excuse to become a supervillain. I asked for no pickles on this sandwich. They gave me one with pickles. That's it. I'm building a doomsday weapon. I've been pushed too far this time. Although, I can sympathize with her desire to see her father again. A desire to see more Alexei Volkov is something we have in common. Bring back Volkov. We want Volkov. Yeah! Volkov's back. Alexei's return in Chuck vs. the Family Volkov is the highlight of the season's second half. Maybe even the season as a whole. As Volkov expands on the humorous portrayal of ruthless mastermind with an idiosyncratic, sensitive side, making the case for prison rehabilitation by turning his life around and attempting to make amends to those he's wronged throughout his career of crime.
I want you to understand, I, like all other men, I'm still a work in progress.
What do you say, Alias? Forgive and forget, right?
Volkov is furloughed from the Huskow so he can escort Team Chuck through a series of deadly board games on a collectathon to retrieve a weapon called the Norseman, a device that can poison individual targets in a crowd by targeting their genetic makeup. Naturally, Volkov goes for the double cross with the aid of his daughter Vivian when they find the final piece, only for Vivian to go for the triple cross and leave her father behind. But it turns out, the people who really betrayed Alexei Volkov were the CIA. 20 years ago. Let me explain. Once upon a time, Alexei Volkov worked alongside Stephen Bartowski, aka Orion, on the Intersect. Back then, the Intersect was going to be used to implant cover identities, so agents could go undercover completely flawlessly. Volkov was the first test personality, but the personality took over a little too well, completely overriding his brain. Racked with guilt over both brainwashing their friend and unleashing a monster on the world, the Bartowskis took it upon themselves to set things right and deprogram Volkov so he could go back to his former self. However, the CIA is less interested in setting things right, since they don't want the truth of Volkov's origins to be leaked to the public, instead coming after Team Chuck for a good old-fashioned CIA cover-up, deprogramming both Alexei and Chuck's intersex in the process. So, for the second time in his life, Adam Baldwin plays a gun-loving character with the initials JC, who is forced to go on the run from the government after he learns they were responsible for creating the world's most feared villains as the result of a failed brainwashing experiment.
Remember when I told you that opening the Agent X files would draw out a remorseless son of a bitch that would destroy our whole team without breaking a sweat? This is the guy they hired to kill that guy.
Casey sorts Team Chuck out with new, untraceable identities so they can flee the feds. But after Vivian poisons Sarah with the Norseman, Chuck reunites the now nice-mode father with his daughter and offers the Volkov family his and Sarah's fake IDs in exchange for the antidote. Vivian relents, and the Volkovs vanish into their new lives. But not before giving Chuck a few parting gifts, an assist from Volkov's private army, so Chuck can win the final showdown with the CIA heavy Clyde Decker and cure Sarah, and several $1 million in Volkov seed money, so Chuck, Casey, Sarah, and Morgan can go into business for themselves as private investigators. Chuck and Sarah get married, and General Beckman secretly gifts the team a pair of Intersect glasses so Chuck can get his powers back, only for Morgan to accidentally upload the Intersect instead.
Slick new gig. Slick new shades. What could go wrong?
The Season 4 finale is certainly a highlight. Team Chuck versus an actively evil CIA feels appropriately high stakes and dangerous, and the Chuck and Sarah stuff is really sweet, as are all the little moments shared with the side characters. Although I was a tad disappointed that I put on my Alexei Volkov's #1 fanboy t-shirt for nothing, since he really only gets one line this episode before the personality intersect is erased and the character is effectively killed off. Despite leaving a good taste in viewers' mouths, the finale isn't strong enough to retroactively redeem Season 4 as a whole. There were just too many missteps along the way. Part of me wants to release a fan edit of Season 4 that just fast-forwards through every part of the season that's more frustrating than fun, or just mind-numbing consequence and humor-free filler, but I'm worried if I did, some parts of the season would go by so fucking fast, it would feel like you're downloading the actual Intersect. But if you're just skipping around to the good episodes, it's an enjoyable season if you watch it through Dalton-colored glasses. We're going into Chuck's 5th and final season, where it turns out Alexei Volkov wasn't the only man who would turn into a dick after downloading the Intersect.
This is actually what I needed to talk to you about. the attitude.
Am I not the world's greatest?
Being the intersect doesn't mean you have to constantly talk about being the intersect.
You did it your way. I'll do it my way.
It's the fifth and final year of Chuck's 5-year plan. In addition to the natural sense of impending payoff that most grand finale seasons of television share, Chuck Season 5 also made 2 smart decisions that help the series maintain a steady momentum approaching the finish line. 1, the episode count is reduced to 13, which means less hours to fill. And 2, those hours are filled by 3 mini story arcs instead of one large, sweeping one. Morgan with the intersect, the CIA's mysterious vendetta against Chuck, and lastly, the Battle of Wits with final big bad, Nicholas Quinn. The premiere is an exciting welcome to the new status quo, with Chuck & Co.'s private security/espionage firm Carmichael Industries desperate to prove themselves in the marketplace, and Chuck desperate to prove he's still an asset to the team now that the intersect has been stripped from his noggin and dumped into Morgan. The episode ends with Chuck cleverly saving the day, no powers necessary, and though I complained in the past about the series hitting the reset button too abruptly in season premieres prior, having Chuck get over his jealousy and feelings of inadequacy now that he's been de-intersected was a smart move. A single episode was enough time to explore Chuck's feelings about the loss, but if we devoted a whole season to him moping over it, I can imagine it would get old fast, especially since, 1, he spent the first 2 seasons saving the day just fine without 2.0, and 2, as mentioned earlier, he was mostly just relying on it as a get-out-of-a-fistfight-for-free device. Nothing more. Use it or lose it, Chuckles.
You're amazing. You are so zen right now. If I had a power like that and then I thought it was gone forever, oh, Chuck, I'd be a wreck. Woof. Not you, man. You are my hero.
The intersect in Morgan's, formerly Chuck's, head also means the bearded bandit has something to prove. Over the course of the series, Chuck grew as a more competent spy, combatant, and hacker-cracker, with or without the computer in his head. But despite the writers occasionally claiming Morgan has grown so much and matured so much over the last 4 years, it's kind of a told not shown thing. Sure, he's risen the ranks of the Buy More corporate ladder, and managed to never stalk Alex at any point, in contrast to all the previous women he's lusted after. But even after getting looped into the spy game, and even after getting brought along on missions, the running gag has been that he'll always drop the ball and screw the mission up.
Found the detonator. Found the detonator, Colonel.
Who's gonna drop it?
And how I dropped it. I can't believe I just did that.
Bombs are armed, everybody! Run!
Morgan being somewhat shortchanged in terms of development means I'm of 2 minds about the fairly odd direction the writers chose to take his intersect storyline in the first third of Season 5. Morgan is increasingly letting the intersect go to his head, with his reckless showmanship and need to save the day only getting the team into further danger, and after Casey benches him, he dumps Alex, quits Carmichael Industries, and goes to work for the competition to further feed his ego. The team soon learns that General Beckman never actually gifted the glasses to them, and it was instead a defective pair dropped off by Decker. With each flash, Morgan loses more of his memories and more of his humanity, which is why he's turned into such a comical jackass. Again, I'm split on how I feel about this storyline. I like seeing Morgan working as a villain against the team, because it's a fresh concept, I'm a sucker for brainwashed characters acting out of character plotlines, and it opens up some dramatic doors later on, as he'll be forced to make amends to those he's wronged during his douchebag bender. On the other hand, in a way it's just more of the same. Morgan is a screw-up who screws up everything, and him getting the intersect is just one big 3-parter mother of all screw-ups, when they could have taken the opportunity to develop the character instead. I know a sizable chunk of the audience absolutely despises Dirtbag Morgan and every episode he appears in, so I'm probably in the minority going to bat for any aspect of it at all, but I thought it had its moments.
Yeah, don't start with New Hope. Old ones, nobody likes that. Phantom Menace. Everyone loves Phantom Menace.
The corrupted intersect glasses are only the first wave of terror, courtesy of Decker the CIA dickhead, who was revealed to be in league with a whole shadowy consortium of other CIA agents, hatching a grand plot to ruin Chuck Bartowski's life. He makes allusions to some sort of conspiratorial designs sweeping across all 5 seasons that reach the highest echelons of power. But don't worry about that. The truth of what's really motivating this anti-Chuck crusade will be revealed in due time, and when the truth comes out, the conspiracy is much more hilariously straightforward than it appears. Decker is a guy who's all about the setup, getting Team Chuck into hot water, offering them a lifeline, only for the lifeline to be another trap. Morgan downloaded the intersect I gave him. Well, that's dangerous government property, bud. So we're putting out a hit on him. You removed Morgan's intersect in case he killed the assassin? Well, that assassin was technically doing government contract work, so we're throwing Casey in jail. If you want to get him out, you have to steal a super dangerous computer virus for me. Hey, Team Chuck, nice computer virus you got there. Too bad I've got pictures of you with it. Enjoy being on the FBI's most wanted list. Casey's new lady friend Verbansky gets bored of Decker's backstabbing and blows him to Kingdom Come, but not before the virus he requested can be released upon the world's computer systems. Despite infecting the whole world, it specifically targets government computers, and more specifically than that, it pops open the supermax cell of an unseen prisoner who makes his escape. Blackmailing the dirty Decker into doing his bidding, the mastermind behind the Make Chuck Suffer campaign is, drumroll please,
Merry Christmas, Sarah.
Shaw is back, and crazier than ever, for the final Chuck Christmas special. Shaw's out-of-nowhere return for a high-stakes revenge scheme makes for an explosive episode, even if it is pretty bonkers that this is where all that CIA scheming was headed. He's also got a pretty bonkers, hackneyed plot to build his own Intersect 3.0 by harvesting and then destroying all government data, so he alone holds the keys to the intelligence community's intel. But the more you focus on the revenge plot and the less you focus on him forcing the CIA to make him a spy again, the better. Chuck manages to dupe Shaw into deprogramming himself, and the two duke it out as flashless equals. All in all, it's an equally tense and wacky ride. So much fun that I'm willing to forgive the myriad plot holes of the episode, most glaringly that the CIA is perfectly capable of deprogramming the Intersect with ease at this point in the series, but I guess they just let Shaw keep that shit. It's easy to look past, since you'll probably be too busy looking for your jaw on the floor after it dropped there when you first saw who was behind that elevator door.
I don't know what your plan is, but it's not gonna work.
Shaw's so handsome and smart. I bet he reads a lot of books.
Even though the show didn't need to do a fake-out finale, old habits die hard, and Chuck versus the Santa suit serves that purpose anyways. After Shaw goes blasting off again, Chuck unwinds a bit with a handful of lighthearted episodes, our last chance to hang out with the characters we've come to know and love, before the closing episodes put them in dire peril. The most playful of all these plot lines running in the background involves habitual huffer Jeff, who learns that his mental fogginess is caused by carbon monoxide poisoning from sleeping in his running van every night. After shaking the habit, Jeff rapidly becomes an articulate, functioning member of society, and also quickly deduces that there's a secret lair underneath the Bymore now that his mental faculties have been restored.
You people are spies! We are not going to forget it because it's right here on my arm!
Jeff and Lester's Groundhog Day loop of repeatedly discovering the truth about the team, then getting drugged into forgetting, only to immediately rediscover the truth again, honestly cracked me up. And the conclusion of the storyline where they are the only people available to save Casey's daughter from a pair of henchmen is just the cherry on top.
Now I need you, my daughter needs you, and your country needs you.
Canada?
The storyline is a tad inorganic, though. I mean, the Chuck writers kind of missed the boat when it came to spilling the beans to Jeff and Lester. Chuck, Casey, and Sarah don't work for the CIA anymore, and with Decker and Shaw defeated, they aren't even tied up in CIA business. So Chuck is essentially just trying to prevent them from discovering the existence of his private business side hustle, which he makes public appearances promoting and which has an active webpage. It would be like if I started drugging people at my job site to keep them from finding this YouTube channel. All that being said, unless you just can't stomach frosted-tipped Morgan, Season 5 is a solid step in the right direction, hot off the heels of the uninspired Season 4. More heart, more laughs, more thrills, and more buy more spy tie-ins. The only dud episode for me was Chuck versus the Baby, an episode that relies heavily on flashbacks to Sarah's past immediately before being sent to Burbank, which seemed to completely forget the existence of Bryce Larkin and her relationship with him, and just gets a whole lot of little details wrong in general. A lot of series look to the characters' past when they're getting close to the end, but if you're gonna do it, don't butcher it. And if you're going to butcher it, make it a Casey flashback instead. His backstory has been so multiple choice over the course of Chuck's 5 seasons, it could rival the Joker's. So any inconsistencies at this point would just be, well, consistent. Speaking of looking back on the past, the final villain intended to tie this all together is Nicholas Quinn, or as fans like to call him, Man Who Is Not Shaw. Yeah, it was kind of odd they brought back Shaw in the final season as the mastermind behind an evil scheme, but not the last evil scheme. Given Shaw's the biggest villain the heroes have faced over the course of the series, that's still kicking, and making him the final foe would have lent the finale a certain sense of continuity. Instead, they're in that awkward Ulysses in the Fallout New Vegas DLC territory, where the writers want a villain who has had years of history learning to hate the hero, but no such villain exists, so they have to write a villain whose motives boil down to, you've never met me, but I hate your ass. So, Quinn was the man destined to get the first intersect before Bryce went and blew it up, and since he didn't have the intersect, he wound up captured and tortured by enemy agents. After his release, he became a gun for hire, going to work for Fulcrum, The Ring, and Volkov Industries, all of whom Chuck would wind up putting out of business over the course of the series. To set right what once went wrong, he wants the life he claims Chuck stole from him. Give me those intersect glasses, or face my wrath.
The intersect was supposed to be mine, but then Larkin stole it for you. Now give it to me!
Of course, this being the endgame, Quinn and his team are some of the deadliest enemies Team Chuck has ever faced. And as a last-minute Hail Mary to survive a doomed firefight, Sarah uploads the corrupted intersect herself. While she does manage to live to flash another day, thanks to her increased combat capabilities, the fun of the Intersect 2.0 is short-lived for Mrs. Bartowski when she winds up in Quinn's clutches and he sees a golden opportunity to turn her against her husband. Realizing the corrupted intersect memory loss isn't a bug, it's a feature, Quinn forces Sarah to flash over and over until she no longer remembers her time with Chuck, then poses as her handler, convinces her Chuck is a terrorist mark she's been working, and sends her back, quote-unquote, undercover to kill her target and get those glasses.
I wish I could just let you forget everything horrible that this man has done. But Chuck Bartowski needs to be stopped.
After some unconvincing marital cover and a few failed murder attempts, Sarah wises up to Quinn's manipulations and joins back up with Carmichael Industries in their quest to stop him. However, just because she realized she's being played doesn't mean all her memories come back, and Chuck falls into despair when it becomes apparent he's lost the superpower, lost the spy business, and now lost the wife of his dreams to sci-fi amnesia. Aside from the frequent callbacks to iconic moments and gags throughout the show's run, the two-part finale is actually fairly grim by Chuck standards, though the ending does loop back around to the sentimentality and silliness the show is known for. Planning to use the final copy of the Intersect to restore Sarah's memories, Chuck's hand is forced by a bomb timed to go off at the end of a concert, and he instead has to upload it to himself to defuse it. Jeff and Lester's band makes a final appearance to extend the concert and, by extension, the clock on the bomb. Quinn is gunned down, and all the characters ride off into the sunset, though unfortunately for Chuck, Sarah is riding off without him. The two meet on the beach where they met at the end of the pilot, and she asks Chuck to tell her about their adventures together before she goes. And after he does, on Morgan's suggestion, Chuck invokes the classic trope of a magic kiss that will fix everything and bring her memories back. Sarah says, why not? Let's give it a try. And the series fades to black. It's a Total Recall style choose your own ending, where it's up to the audience's interpretation and level of schmaltzy romantic optimism, whether Chuck and Sarah parted ways as friends, or if Sarah magically remembered everything and they lived happily ever after, with just enough hints strewn throughout that both outcomes are equally likely. If I had a nickel for every show that ended in 2012 with the main nerdy character's love interest losing her memories of their relationship, only for the series finale to drop ambiguous hints that the memories might be impossibly, inexplicably coming back, I'd have 2 nickels. Which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it happened twice.
So what you're saying is, Chuck Bartowski is a spy who runs a spy company underneath the store.
The exciting part of the story is that we saved the day.
So that's Chuck. While it occasionally clung all too fiercely to things as they were, the final season actually wound up being the most experimental of the bunch. That's something I appreciated, and it made the final season captivating to revisit, though I know that decision certainly had its detractors. I can see why, especially if you're just here for the reliable, hangout, feel-good mentality of the series. These are the last 13 hours we'll ever get to spend with these characters, but for almost half of them, one of the main characters is brainwashed and not acting like themselves. While I felt the series most thrived while it was being fueled by larger narrative goals stringing the episodes together, it's true that even during the dark times, the show strove for a sense of optimism and camaraderie. Follow your heart, because our heads only screw things up. More than don't keep secrets from your partner, don't stalk your ex, don't leave your van running while you sleep in it, and every woman you interact with is probably a Fed. That was the core lesson Chuck was trying to teach us. A very sweet lesson to learn. Let's just hope we manage to remember it. Huge thanks as always to my Patreon supporters for all your support of the channel. And again, special thanks to this video's sponsor, Surfshark VPN. Remember to check their link out in the video description below.
They got acid, just like in that really disgusting scene from Breaking Bad.
I've never seen Breaking Bad.
What? You'd love it. It's great. It's like the perfect counter-programming.
Morgan, shut up.